They had a perfect moment in time, and that's as much as that cliff was going to give them. I'm glad that she got in her car and drove off with here because, you know, if she would have hung out any longer, it was like the entire mountain was going to fall on top of her. I mean, that cliff had it out for them or something. I don't know what it was, but, you know, it just didn't end well for the Bonishes.
Nothing happens by chance. Every single thing that ever happens for a reason, happens due to the law of the universe. And it's just incumbent upon me to figure out enough what those laws are and to obey those laws. I feel that when I jump off a cliff, I'm obeying those laws of the universe, including gravity.
Ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
Okay, four, 3, 2, 1, go.
We've moved over to the midpoint of our newsroom to get away from the mainstream news of the day and look at some of the more unusual things going on. Although, of course, I've been one of the more unusual things going on for most of the day. And one of them is the growing fad of parachuting from skyscrapers, especially here in Los Angeles. And you pursued that yesterday afternoon.
Downtown Los Angeles is a natural for this sort of thing. In particular, the high-rise construction boom is a big attraction because the unfinished buildings usually have very little security. Jumpers can often make it secretly to the top and make their jumps. Not too many years ago, this sport wouldn't have worked in Los Angeles because there were no true high-rise buildings. But now, several buildings are above 50 stories tall, and skyscraper skydiving is a big sport. It is also illegal.
We almost feel like we're astronauts walking on the moon. It just gives us a feeling of power and of joy. And we want to share it with the world, but every time we try to, you know, people can't relate because in a sense it's out of their realm.
Do you know, when I first started this story, I thought, that's a crazy thing. Why would anyone want to do that? But after talking for a while with those people and hearing the thrill that they get from it, I have to admit, it's a little tempting.
No.
Only a little, but it is.
Doofus.
My guest name rhymes with Danish. His name is Carl Bonish. You are a cinematographer, A, but you are, B, a cliff jumper. I want to say that again so people know I meant to say it. Cliff jumper. You jump off cliffs, Carl. You do that.
Yes, I do, Pat.
So I'd rather go and journey where the diamond crescent's glowing and run across the valley beneath the sacred mountain and wander through the forest where the trees have leaves of prisms and break the light in colors that no one knows the names of. And when it's time, I'll go and wait beside a legendary fountain till I see your form reflected in its clear and jeweled waters. And if you think I'm ready, you may lead me to the chasm where the rivers of our vision flow into one another.
One of my mottos is, there's no future in growing up. I just never want to grow up. Most people, I guess, they grow old. I don't want to grow old or grow up. I don't want to be childish, but I think there are a lot of virtues in being childlike, because if you study a child, he hasn't been taught what he can't do.
They all do a lot of praying.
Yes.
You do pray.
I think a lot of this comes from a metaphysical basis, even a spiritual basis. I think that the biggest aspect of why I do this is for rejuvenation, because if I can master these goals, it improves every other department in life. And I think that if a group of people can watch me jump off a building and be successful, they can say, well, I probably don't want to do that, but maybe I can bowl that perfect 300 game.
He was a guy that was everything and everywhere all at once. And he had this crazy infectious enthusiasm, and he would laugh and he would fly over the piano and play some classical riffs, and then he would talk about quantum mechanics, and then he would sort of get a little weepy, and then he'd wax nostalgic about, you know, some job that he had. Then we'd go out and jump on the trampoline. It was like a stream of consciousness, half from hell and half from, you know, some better world somewhere. I mean, it was really an interesting kind of thing being around this guy.
Our father's name was Carl, and Ronnie was Carl, so at home we always called him Ronnie. My brother got polio from a polio vaccine. They weren't sure he was going to live.
But he survived it, and for his recovery, he was in a wheelchair and couldn't walk. His legs were really weak, so he spent his time playing the piano.
When he had polio, he missed a whole year of elementary school. But once he finally got cleared and could go back to school, he challenged every boy in his class one at a time till he could beat them in a foot race, and he beat every one of them.
He talked to me a lot about his birth mother leaving, and I think that touched him deeply.
Then he was in high school, and he was, you know, very intellectual and always doing his calculus.
So he had just finished college when I was born and started working for Hughes Aircraft as an electrical engineer.
But once he got into skydiving, he just changed. I mean, they're always pulling you in, you're part of a group, you have to fly together, so he changed completely.
Life is only a moving picture. Nothing in life is a permanent fixture. Oh no, oh no.
You used to be an engineer, pretty safe, secure type job. When and how did you make the decision to give that all up and go into doing this, what you like to do, full time?
It's funny. My boss at Hughes Aircraft told me, Carl, the man who knows how will always have a job. The man who knows why will be his boss. And at that time, I knew how to design electrical circuits. I knew how to skydive, but I knew why to skydive much better than I knew why the electronic circuits worked.
A new sheet of paper, new heading entitled The Gypsy Moths.
He was working at Hughes Aircraft, and he got the opportunity to do Gypsy Moths. And that was a big MGM production.
I was asked by MGM to be in charge of the aerial freefall filming sequences.
John Frankenheimer, the director who created the excitement of Grand Prix, now captures the drama and spectacle of the death-defying game called skydiving in The Gypsy Moths.
So he went and took the Gypsy Moths job, and that was the end of his electrical engineering career.
I didn't exactly know how I wanted to film the aerial sequences when I started. I had to experiment and try all kinds of things. And I had to find really young guys who were willing to do that.
Hold it!
Carl was an innovator. He's probably the only one in Hollywood or in the area that was known for freefall photography.
Background of Carl Bonish and his films. Carl Bonish's early start. He has been able to put off going back to work 2 months at a time, such that for over the last 10 years, he has never had to go back to work, and is accustomed to making film payments instead of car payments. As it's worked out in the past, Carl Bonish usually spends about 2 years to make one 15-minute film.
If you were jumping with Bonish, it was expected that you were going to be wearing a helmet-mounted camera, or possibly two. That was Carl's main focus, was to share the wealth, share that feeling, to share the feeling with people that didn't understand it, that thought we were absolutely crazy to do something like this. But once you see it and see the beauty of it, I think people tend to understand the motive.
I've been skydiving for 18 years now, and I've been filmmaking for just as long. Primarily, I'd consider myself a filmmaker first and a skydiver second.
So whatever he did, he wanted to capture on film the best way he could.
I think he wanted to show the humanity, the freedom that is felt when you are pushing the envelope of what that human spirit can accomplish.
Yosemite is beautiful, it's breathtaking. Many people cry when they first see it. It's beyond their expectation, beyond their experience. I was the chief ranger in Yosemite National Park, and my job was protection. So protecting the park from the people, and the people from the park, and the people from the people.
Where did you get the inclination to jump off a cliff?
Well, this comes from making 1,500 parachute jumps over 15 years and becoming so proficient at it that you wonder, well, what else is out there?
El Capitan, 3,600 feet of polished granite rising from California's Yosemite Valley. For climbers, its vertical ascent is one of the great challenges of North America. A group of professional parachutists traveled to this unique spot to experience flight.
When I organized the first load to go to El Capitan, we spent nearly all summer there, 4 or 5 trips, scouting the geography, finding, hopefully, places suitable to jump. And we stumbled upon this really idyllic place that's about 3,000 feet tall with an overhang of a couple hundred feet. And as soon as I saw it, I yelled, "Eureka!"
The pioneers of this remarkable attempt are skydivers Kent Lane and Tom Stark, along with Kenny Coslin, Mike Sheeran, and helper Sally Wenzel. Expedition leader Carl Bonish with Dave Littell.
Carl, on his own, was doing a lot of research on El Cap and then, asked me to help him with the filming of it.
I wanted to figure out a way, if possible, to film a person running off a cliff, but from a vantage point looking back toward the cliff.
The first jumps were going to be made off El Cap, and Carl wanted to get motion picture footage of the first jumpers running towards him, jumping off the cliff, and then that way he could then follow them down as they were in free fall.
Actually, I made a homemade ladder that's about 20 feet long out of aluminum, and I'm perched on the end of this ladder so I could film toward the cliff.
It was a long pole, and it had some cross pieces on it to kind of make it like a little bit of a ladder. When it was set up by the rock climbers on El Cap, it was just this rod sticking out from the mountain with a little bicycle seat. And if you were going to sit on that bicycle seat, there's nothing between you and 3,000 feet below you. I mean, it was just nothing.
He would go out there, and then he'd have to get up the nerve and then swing 180 so that he could sit on that seat. He was nuts. He's absolutely nuts. And then you would hear his laugh, and you were guaranteed that he was nuts. And he talked us into jumping off this thing, so we're all nuts. We were all young and not knowing any better. We're ready to go.
Kent Lane, first jumper off of the first trip. 2.5 years jumping, 600 jumps.
Yeah, my name's Kent Lane. Well, the first time I heard about it, it sounded like a really neat thing to do. I was scared to death.
When I was out on this ladder, I'd make sure everyone was ready. And I would start the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
I saw a wall, a huge granite wall, accelerating right next to me.
When you exit off of a cliff, there's no wind to work with. And so how you go off is how you're going to stay for the next 4 or 5 seconds. Can't wait to do it again.
And so once we got down on the ground, we had ground crew that took our gear and they placed them under rocks or under logs. It was all mapped out. We were all dressed up as hikers. All we did was we land and stood, and ground crew changed us from skydiver to hiker, and then we just, dispersed.
We were entirely successful in all our cliff jumps, because I feel that we were constantly led by the idea that we were glorifying mankind's beautiful spirit of seeking adventure, and that we were within our rights of freedom and dominion over all the earth. There are many man-made laws that aren't laws at all that need to be broken. One is the belief that it's impossible to jump off a cliff.
The activity I thought was exciting, and to do it off of El Cap just triggered my imagination. I thought that was wonderful. I didn't feel adversarial, but it didn't keep me from doing my job at times. Didn't seem like it was going to stop. How do you herd a bunch of cats? We had word that there were going to be cliff jumpers coming into the top of El Cap, and it was against the law. This is a cat and mouse part of it.
A couple weeks later, when Carl and I went back and we jumped off together, I got caught by the ranger. I was the first person ever caught for base jumping in Yosemite.
Tom Stark, Dave Battelle, and Joe Morgan got citations. I was actually an attorney for the federal government at the time, so I couldn't represent them. But I did a lot of pro bono work for them, and we were trying to challenge their park's regulation.
Speaking of El Capitan, there have been some controversies around that. Apparently the park did not want people jumping off their cliffs
Yes,
out of concern
true.
for the people, I would think.
And we can certainly see their point of view, but you see, they just didn't understand. In fact, they couldn't even believe that we just jumped off. Basically, we will just jump off and fall for 10 seconds and fall over 1,000 feet.
I found most of the jumpers very agreeable. Carl was special. You kind of have an instinct about the ringleaders. He was easy to remember, had this aura of life. You don't have to dislike someone to take away their freedom.
My name is Carl Bonish. I'm expedition of this leader.
The park ranger at the time that issued these citations was aware that Carl was involved in it.
What did you say with respect to the filming? Okay, they asked me, whose equipment it was, and first of all, they said, where's Carl? Where's Carl Bonish? Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Hey, they're out for blood.
Somehow we got involved with rangers. The film was confiscated. Carl was very concerned about his film.
One of those that was there was the park ranger that sort of had this vendetta against Carl. And they continued to press the litigation aspect.
We don't want to be limited by anything except nature. We always have to listen to nature's laws, but not necessarily man's laws.
The U.S. magistrate, Don Pitts, he was kind of tired of seeing this parade of cliff jumpers coming in, so he was throwing the book at him.
I know that the park ranger, that he was really trying to focus on Carl.
I don't mind being called paranoid, if that's what you want to call it or me. I do admit to being extreme and radical, and I feel that I'm justified in being extreme and radical if it's based on truth and principle. I believe that truth is radical.
My time with Carl ended at the beginning of '79. You know, you were either all in or you know, there were challenges. At some level, he was really trying to kind of close that gap of getting that unconditional, forever love by his side.
The very fact that Carl was around 40 years old and not married told me that he either wasn't interested in women or not interested in marriage.
He was geek, a nerd, everything you can imagine in that scope. I wouldn't say he was popular with the ladies. I know that when it came to Jeannie, something really captured him about her. His whole life just changed, and that's was the focus of his life was Jeannie.
Those of us who met Carl, anybody, would go away with part of his goodness. It becomes a part of you. And whenever anybody expresses goodness, it travels away with that person. Carl and I first met in April of 1979. I was a sophomore at Pomona College, and Carl was showing his most recent film, which was Skydive. Afterwards, he had us get in a circle. He said, "Everybody stand up, get in a circle, and hold hands." So the group of us stood up and held hands the way he had requested, and we're thinking, this is a bit odd. Where is he going with this? And of course, he just wanted us to experience the position that skydivers would be in when they came into a star formation. His purity was a very attractive quality, and everybody recognized that. When we were all departing, I saw another girl was talking to him and giving him her phone number, and I thought, well, she's very interested, so I just let it be. It had been fun to see Carl's movie. It was nice to meet and talk with a parachutist. I wanted to pursue this somehow, and I thought to myself, oh, I know Carl. I believe that I wrote him a letter, actually. He ended up calling me and telling me, I'll come out and get you. It's right on the way to the drop zone. And this ended up being our first date. Carl and I talked a lot going out to the drop zone. It was a long drive. We talked about things that we believed in, principles that we held to. While we were at the drop zone, Carl said, let's have a foot race. And I thought, oh, okay. I think we were running next to the airplane as the airplane was starting to take off. It was just something that came to him to do. I guess maybe in a sense it was just a gauge of possibilities. It had gotten late in the day after our day at the drop zone, and it was a long drive back, and Carl had told me that his sister had her house right there at Lake Elsinore and that she wasn't home. He said, it will be fine if we just spent the night there. So he said, well, you can sleep here on the couch and I'll go sleep in the bedroom where I usually do. After a couple of hours, he came in and said, can I lie down here beside you on the floor? And I said, well, that's okay. That's okay. Then he said, can I hold your hand? And so I said, yeah. And so he was lying there parallel to me, and we're holding hands, and that's the way we spent the night. In a matter of just a few weeks, we covered all the ground that each of us felt was necessary to figure out if we were sufficiently compatible to start a life together. It wasn't start a relationship, live together, any of that. It was start a life together, get married.
You were about to get married in a week.
Yes, I'm very excited about that.
Does your fiance jump off cliffs?
Well, not yet. She would like to. Since we met, she's made 8 skydives, and she has a natural affinity for the air. And I think she's going to be a very fine skydiver.
She didn't seem like the skydiver type to me.
And I remember she wore this like red and yellow and blue, like bright clothes. And she kind of looked like she worked at the little hot dog stand where they dip the hot dogs. This girl just does not look like a skydiver.
More than once, people at the drop zone pegged me as a librarian and some as a nun. They were trying to figure out where I was coming from.
There's this psychologist named Jung, and he always talked about the marriage of opposites, right? And if you wanted the diametric opposite of Carl Banish, that would be Jean Banish.
I had that thoughtful demeanor, and Carl did too. We were both very analytical, very detail-oriented, and interested in an intelligent approach to everything. We were two people who were a very good coupling, a unique coupling. We were very well fit for each other, and we loved each other very much.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, here we are. I am interviewing you live from the church of the marriage of Jean and Carl Banish. Jean, would you like to come here and say a word, please? Quick, hurry, hurry. We're running out of tape. And this is our...
All right, one word. I don't know what I've gotten myself into.
One word is, I do.
Those are 2 words.
When I was considering base jumping, when it was presented to me by Carl, it was something that struck me as pleasant as camping.
One of the most interesting and sort of incomprehensible love stories ever, but they got along great. She was sort of the brains of the operation.
So I was marrying into his established business and joining him in partnership as the team.
15 seconds. Camera goes on at 5. Here we go. 5,
4, 3, 2, 1, go!
There she goes.
Woohoo! All right!
It was a wonderful thing for both of us to begin our life working together on a daily basis.
Beautiful, perfect form. Oh, man.
Hey, Carl, Bonish, it went really well. Let me tell you something, though. It takes more than 4 seconds to open. Well, at least a count of 4 when you're scared.
Roger, I copy. Yeah, I'll tell you, you can, oh. Hey, you had such flawless form. You were rock steady. Everything went mint. You make a hard act to follow, Gene. That was flawless stability. I'm going to try to do the same thing. Head high, bend the knees.
Pretty easy, though. Have a good one.
Okie doke.
What it is, it's a rush. You know, I'm using the word scared because it's not, you know, when you're counting the seconds, it's not that. It's just that you seem to count extra fast. It's what skydivers call a rush. You know, you jump off and there's absolutely nothing because you can't work with anything. You're at the mercy of nothing. You're falling.
Jean Bonish, if I saw her in the street, the last thing in the world I would think is that she would put a parachute on and jump off a rock. But she believed and loved him so much. And if Carl said that you could jump off a cliff, do this, and do this, she did it. And she did it better than most of the men at the time.
Well, we're kind of used to people calling us crazy, but at least in our opinion, we're not crazy. We're basically fun-loving adventurers, and we really have fun skydiving. It's almost become a way of life for us. We take it so seriously. Interestingly enough, if it weren't for the camera, at least I personally probably wouldn't be that interested in skydiving, because the camera captures something not only for ourselves, but for everybody over a vast amount of time. And it's really a sense of creativity that we do a lot of things in skydiving just for the sake of the camera and hence millions of people to see what we do.
At that time, pretty much all the base jumping was called into the Manor Drive house. We're going to go jump El Capitan at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Want to come film?
Carl and Jean, this is Mary Todd. Well, I'm over here. We did El Cap yesterday, and it just went so fantastic. Piece of cake, everything. As you can tell, nothing happened. No rangers.
So to say he was a ringleader, yes, he didn't tell people to go jump, but he knew about it.
Even though we had had problems with the National Park Service as far as arrests or people wanting to fine or prohibit, base jumping was not an illegal activity. And in the Park Service specifically, it should easily have been a permitted activity.
Currently, it's pretty illegal to jump off of the top of most of those cliffs, and I know that you've been instrumental in fighting that. What's going on with that now? Is that going to be legalized in your opinion?
Well, we hope that in time, just like mountain climbing, that it will be unregulated. Mm-hmm. Right now, we want to work hand in hand with the Park Service.
We both wanted the same thing, to legalize it, to reduce the danger of jumping illegally, because they were doing it at night, trying to evade us.
Bill Wendt is the National Park Service Director for Yosemite.
El Capitan happens to be inside of Yosemite National Park, and it's one of the few cliffs in the world where they can safely jump from the top of a cliff and parachute down to a suitable landing site.
We have finally, after a year of negotiating back and forth, you might say, convinced the Park Service that it can be done safely. The Park Service is issuing permits.
She got me going. It's like so low and your hips are showing. I thank you, girl, as you're standing there. You look as slack as your long black hair. You make me move you like no one else. So when I'm with you, I can't control myself. Bend down and you got me shaking. So that my nerves are breaking.
It worked, and it worked for a while, but it really started to be untenable. There were just too many free spirits. and we had to shut them down the 9th of September.
Jumping off El Capitan was first unregulated because it was unthought of. And then it was regulated because it was feared. And then it was banned because it was abused.
We got it started because I recommended it, and it was stopped because I recommended it, so I'm responsible. And maybe I was too impatient and didn't, that I will admit.
It really has no connection with what we consider to be an international aviation sport. I think it's more closely related to circus acrobats and circus tricks.
Okay, the Granite Circus was one of Carl's dreams. The last day of jumping, he wanted to make it spectacular. So he arranged for one person to be on stilts, that was me. Mayfield was going to go off walking on his hands on a handstand. Carl was on a pogo stick, and one other guy was going to be on a skateboard. I got up on the stilts, made about, what, 2 or 3 steps, and I was gone. It was so cool that that kind of set my heels in. I was into base jumping, even though it wasn't called base jumping at the time. It was that was the program for me.
After the permitted season of jumping from El Capitan, the number of jumpers that was interested in doing this activity was growing. And Carl, in his foresight, knew that we needed to be able to call it something other than fixed object skydiving or skydiving from fixed objects or cliff jumping. There were boundaries beyond just cliffs.
I found some other objects around that I thought might be interesting to jump.
Phil Smith, Smitty, came up with a couple of ideas. One of them was jumping off TV towers. He had a TV tower in Houston that was over 1,000 feet high. He also mentioned that there was a building going up under construction that was ultimately going to be about 900 feet high, a little bit more. One thing led to another. Carl and Gene decided to come out in January of 1981. The 4 of us would go down and jump the TV tower. That was the prime focus. You know, the building had been mentioned almost in passing. It seemed like, not having done either one, that a TV tower jump would be a lot more feasible than a building, just because of the logistics of getting onto a building. Smitty did all the homework and lined it up for us. And by that, I mean, I figured out when we needed to be there and how to get onto the tower, because we'd have to climb a fence, how to get away, and how many sets of cables there were on the tower so we could avoid hitting those. Bottom line is, we jumped that.
Carl and I had traveled out to Phil Mayfield's house, and we met Phil Smith there as well.
And we started talking about Carl's latest idea, his grand idea, his big picture of fixed object jumping.
That evening, we were up in Phil's house in Arlington, and we were planning our next day's jump. And Carl had been daydreaming all week and brainstorming this thing, and he came up with the idea of making an organization where, to be a member, you had to have jumped these 4 different kinds of objects.
And so we started brainstorming, you know, different acronyms, different names that would come up with something that was kind of catchy.
I don't really know who came up with it, but it evolved into the word base.
And all of the guys instantly just grabbed hold of base and said, well, that's the one.
What's your group called?
Well, we don't...
Crazy Men of the World, or what? No, what do you call, really?
That's what most people call us.
Yeah.
But we've got an organization. We have to be members of it, although we don't have really a roster of official members yet. It's too new an organization. The type jumping that we do, first of all, is called base jumping. BASC is an acronym for buildings, antenna towers, spans, and earth.
So at that time, nobody had jumped all 4 things. We had kind of planned to do the building in Houston. At that time it was called Texas Commerce Tower.
You jumped off a cliff, I mean, what's next? I've heard you want to jump off buildings.
Well, yes, it's just mankind's spirit that's bubbling out saying, hey, if there are mountains, let's climb them. If there are buildings, let's jump off of them.
Houston was going through a lot of growth. They were building several new buildings that were going to be about 1,000 feet high. And at that time, that was kind of our criteria. I didn't want to do much lower than that. The nice thing about those buildings is when a building's under construction, they're really vulnerable to people like us. Often the buildings would have just a chain link fence around it. You could just pull it apart and find some place to get in or climb over it. It was real easy to do. There is a stairway, no elevator, but there was a stairway, and we just went up to the top, no problem. With Carl Banish, you have to understand, the number one thing is the film. So it didn't matter the security of getting away and making the jump and getting all that stuff. That was secondary to getting that film. So we got in there real early. We could have made a jump in and got out, but the light wouldn't have been good. So we always had to wait on Carl for perfect light.
About the time we started seeing a little bit of traffic down the streets, Carl let us know that, okay, the time is right, the conditions are good. Once we put the jumpsuits on and the cameras on and plugged them in, we knew that it was just about the time. As soon as we got the go-ahead, okay, we're ready down there, helicopter's ready, okay, guys, we're waiting on you. We knew that we had to start the countdown, turn the cameras on. I didn't want to screw up, and neither one of us did. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The thing that I remember most was looking down as I was pushing out at the windows on each floor going by. And the first second, I saw 2 or 3 go by, and then by the third second, they're going by just incredibly fast, just shoo, 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 shoo.
Step off, and then you'll see the building behind you or the cliff or whatever it is as it just goes.
I let go of my pilot chute, which opens my canopy, because I see Smitty's over here. His is already starting to string out. I let mine go, and I opened probably 150 feet below him. And just as soon as I got open and I was not facing the building, I breathed an enormous sigh of relief. Because now the whole thing's over, all the danger's over. All I gotta do is land and hopefully get away. But even if I don't get away, if I get detained by the police because I was trespassing, I'm okay with that.
About the things that we have done this year. The dark lies down the pouring rain. I'm underneath the smoker's railway arch again. The future's looking colorful. It's the color of blood, chaos, and corruption of the happy.
So Phil Mayfield and I guess we skyrocketed into history and made the first completed base numbers.
Bill Smith is base jumper #1. He was the first person to jump all 4 required objects and has since made over 50 successful leaps.
Skydiving then was just as much a challenge as base jumping is now. So it's that challenge that we're seeking. And we really want to expand our environment to include bigger and more and greater things. And base jumping, there's so many things out there that haven't been tamed that I'm really excited to tackle them.
1981, after I made the building jump and got, the base program started, we actually told the public, told the world about base. Of course, it grew exponentially after that.
Almost immediately, Carl was bent on legitimizing it to the world.
Are you bored with your life? 9 to 5, looking at the clock, check in, check out? Look, you only go around once. You might as well go for it. Carl and Jean Banish are here. They're base jumpers. You jump off of buildings, antenna towers, bridges,
yes,
and Earth. Yeah.
Yes.
And you're both crazy.
No, we're not.
No.
As the equipment got better and word spread about this thing, then the numbers began really accelerating. And then it became a worldwide thing, not just the United States or not just Texas and California.
It took off.
WTV News time, 11:53. The still uncompleted 54-story Crocker Center in downtown L.A. may have seen the last skydiver jump from its lofty heights.
A group of intrepid divers has been climbing to the top of the building and parachuting off for about 4 months, but always at 2 or 3 in the morning. The jumpers say it's a new sport called base diving. Police aren't sure what to call it, but they say there's no law against it, except maybe trespassing.
Question: why did you jump off the Crocker Center building in downtown Los Angeles? Answer: because it was there and a lot of fun. Carl, how can you justify breaking the law to jump that building? Answer: what laws am I breaking?
He assigned a lot more importance to the laws of nature than he did the laws of man. The laws of man, in Carl's eyes, were temporary at best.
There were buildings in downtown Los Angeles that were under construction. The Crocker Center happened to start construction when we were interested in jumping off of buildings.
Well, you know, Jean and I have each jumped from a building, a 1,000-foot, 75-story skyscraper.
Oh.
And people say, why? Why did you do it, Jean?
I actually do it for the fun of it. It's the feeling that you get when you jump off of a high dive. There's nothing to push against like when you're swimming through the water. You are falling, literally, for the first 2 seconds, and you can't control your fall. That's why you have to be very careful in the manner in which you exit.
One morning, Carl had gone to do an early morning jump after it was already light.
Yesterday, 3 men jumped off the unfinished building, the Crocker building in downtown Los Angeles, in their sport of skydiving. And today, I talked to one of the 3, Carl Banish.
You're standing there, and no matter how seasoned a skydiver you are, or a base jumper, you're very apprehensive and you're nervous. But you know in your mind you can do it, even though your physical body says you better not do it. I mean, that's 700 feet straight down. So finally you say, here we go, ready, set, go. And the first second, you start accelerating incredibly fast. It leaves you almost breathless. And then the second, you have a feeling of freedom and power and confidence, almost euphoria. And you think, wow, I feel like Superman.
The next day, the LA Times had this photograph of Carl right on the front page, jumping off of Crocker Center. Plain as day, literally.
Crocker Center. I want to advise you that at 1:30 tomorrow afternoon in Department 85 of the Los Angeles County Superior Court, the owners of the property are going to seek an injunction against you, an ex parte application for a temporary restraining order against you, members of your group, and any other skydivers from jumping off of the Crocker Center. I suggest that you have your attorney call me.
And I pick up the LA Times one day and I see this picture of somebody jumping off Crocker Bank, and I read the article and okay, there's Carl. Then a day or two later, I get this phone call from Carl saying, Jim, I think I'm in a little bit of trouble.
Here's a message.
Call team, this is Jim Winkler. Give me a call as soon as possible. Crocker Bank apparently does not want to settle.
They wanted to get control over this situation. So the Crocker Center decided that they wanted to start legal proceedings specifically against Carl because he was named in the newspaper.
They couldn't catch him most of the time. And then when he was caught, I would guess the prosecutor at the time, you know, told the judge, we know this guy's doing this, so the court ordered that he could not go into anything over a 30-story building without a judge's approval.
As long as you do your homework and know what you're doing, a lot of us do this day in and day out, and we do it very systematically. The difference in attention to detail is being a hero or being dead.
Some base jumps are illegal, others are not. Tomorrow in Memphis, Tennessee, as part of that city's annual Cotton Carnival, base jumpers Gene and Carl Bonish plan to parachute from the top of a downtown office building.
That building is called the 100 North Main Building, and it's 432 feet to the top of the 36th floor.
A man came up and introduced himself, and he happened to also be the president of the Union Planters Bank Building, which was the largest building in Memphis, Tennessee. And he said, would you like to jump off of that building for the Cotton Carnival? And Carl and I just looked at each other, and we both turned back to him and we said, well, that would be great. We'd be very interested in doing that. They had a parade, and they had arranged for Carl and I to ride on one of the floats so that we would be the co-grand marshals of the parade. So we were co-grand marshals, and our job was to jump down from the building crystal medallions that were made especially for the king and queen of the Cotton Carnival.
If you were around the Bonishes long enough, you got the feeling of people that didn't really belong. They weren't weird, all right? They were different, a little eccentric even. They didn't really fit anywhere, right?
See you at the bottom.
But they fit together.
Here we go! 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
This is for all lonely people, thinking that life has passed them by. Don't give up until you drink from the silver cup and ride that highway in the sky. This is for all the single people, thinking that love has left them dry. Don't give up until you drink from the silver cup. You never know until you try. Well, I'm on my way. Yes, I'm back to stay. Well, I'm on my way back home. Get it?
We've just reached the Trollveggen, which is the largest cliff face in Europe, and is going to be the site for our assault on the world base jumping record.
Standing over here on this ledge is Carl Bonish and his wife Jean, and they're about to fling themselves off the mountain in something called base jumping.
At that time, I was a recently graduated dude with no career from graduate school studying literature and philosophy. You know, I had no idea what I was going to do other than what I had been doing, which was rock climbing and sea kayaking and, you know, generally doing things that were really fun that made no money. So I just took my expertise in adventure and applied it to production, and I ended up working for David Frost. We needed to have a centerpiece for an ABC special. That special being the Guinness Book of World Records, which showed on ABC and also on BBC. We needed to have a centerpiece thing, which was an international big sort of action-adventure thing that could carry the whole show. I figured base jumping was going to be it.
Carl was thrilled to be contacted by the Guinness people and given the opportunity. This was really an opportunity being given to us.
Meeting Carl Bonish was not like anything I'd ever experienced. And, you know, by that time I'd been to New Guinea and freaking North Pole, and I mean, I'd been all over and had seen just about every kind of person imaginable, but I had never seen anybody like Carl Bonish. Super energetic. You know, he had plans to do everything, and he documented he had pictures of everything, and he was everything. You know, everything about Carl was out there right from the beginning, and it was like running into a geyser. It was just like, whoa, look at this guy, you know.
Carl, what's the old record?
The tallest base jump ever made is 4,900 feet, and that was made at Half Dome in Yosemite National Park.
High by anybody's standards. And Jean, what are you going to attempt today?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what the height is here, but it's definitely over 4,900 feet.
All the best to you both.
Thank you.
Okay.
When they said, let's go and do a record jump. Let's find a site that's the highest from point of launch to point of landing. And where would you like to go and do that? The world was our oyster, and we chose Norway. Norway is beautiful, and the people are wonderful. And as they say, there's a very open trust. That's Norway.
It was like mounting an expedition, really, and we were pretty much involved in that from the time that he said he could and would do it until the time we left, which is, I don't know, 2.5 weeks later. It was pretty much a mad dash. I flew across the Atlantic, went to London and spent a day there, took a flight up to Oslo, and the Bonishes were already there, and I just jumped in a rental car with them when we drove up to Åndalsnes, which took all day. It was a time of year where the nights weren't really nights. I mean, it was a midnight sun kind of thing. So the sun never really totally set. So we just kept driving and driving and driving. That went on for 8 hours, and we ended up in Åndalsnes, and I saw this cliff for the first time. I said, wow, that's gonna be interesting. It's a scary sort of place. It's like Sleepy Hollow with these huge cliffs rising up both sides. Really formidable and really, really intimidating. And it was really bad weather. It was just drizzly and cloudy and weird. I wasn't real enthusiastic that it was going to break anytime soon. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing because I knew it was going to take us a little while to try to figure out what we were going to do and where we were going to jump. One glance up there, and I knew it was going to take me a while to get fluent with the whole area. It was just too big. It's too big and too confusing up there. So I was lucky enough to meet Fred Zoe. He had climbed around here a whole lot. He was not only a great sort of partner and climber, but a really decent, soulful guy, and we got along perfectly from the beginning. We hooked up, and every day we'd hike up the backside of Trollveggen and go up there marching around looking for places to go.
Started climbing when I was 15, and I've been doing quite a lot of climbing in the area here in Romsdal. I first met Carl when Arne Randers asked me to be a local guide and be responsible for the security up in the mountains while I was doing the parachute. I really didn't know what's going on then, what they were going to do, but it was a really exciting time to be together with them. I remember his leg, that he was, have hurt it once, broke it, I think, and that he did not go to a doctor.
When Fred and I first started hiking up to the top of the Troll Wall to figure out a location where we're going to jump, Carl went along with us, but he was such a slow hiker that ultimately we decided to keep, most of the time to go up there without him because he just couldn't keep up.
Carl, when we got up into the mountains, had some problems with his leg all the time. When he got tired, because it was hurting very much, I think.
I go, this guy, what's with this guy? why is he going so freaking slow? It was driving me crazy. It'd take half the day to get up to the top of the cliff, right? And I thought he was just lazy. And finally there's a little stone hut that you can sort of take shelter in on your way up. And we got about halfway up and we got to the stone hut and it started raining, so we had to actually go in this hut. We went in this hut, we're sitting down and Carl's rubbing his leg. I go, what's going on with it? You know, what's up, Carl? And he pulls his pant leg up and his leg has this, the bone goes down like this and takes this like jog. I'm like, Carl, what's going on with that leg? And it turned out he'd broken his leg. He'd broken his leg hang gliding, I don't know, a couple of years before, and he never got it set because he's a Christian Scientist. I didn't know anything about any of that.
I believe that there's a law and order to the universe. Some people call it God. I don't care what you call it. I just know that mathematics never fails us. If we get the wrong answer, we didn't apply something correctly. Nothing happens by chance. Every single thing that ever happens for a reason. Happens due to the law of the universe.
One of the things I kept looking for was some place that was sort of cantilevered out like that. So we found this thing, Steuben Pinnacle. Get to the top of this thing, there's a bunch of big boulders around. What you do is you do what's called a rock test. And what you want is something that falls somewhere around between 15 and 20 seconds before it hits the wall. The whole thing with base jumping is you don't want to hit the wall. That's what's going to kill you. Fred and I pushed 10 rocks off the top of Steuben Pinnacle. They all hit between 3 and 5 seconds every time. We did the rock test and immediately ruled that out as something we would do. Carl goes, nah, it's too dangerous, doesn't give it enough time.
It was quite a lot of people because it was a big team and we had all the helicopters. So it was both local people that was going up to see what was going on and also a lot of tourists that were stopping because of the helicopter traffic that was going on there.
It was a big event in Europe also, so there was news teams from all over Europe were here waiting for this thing to happen. I mean, it was a zoo. You know, I was hoping to be able to do this thing sort of on a low profile, but by the time the thing finally happened, I mean, it was no secret to anybody. The Bonishes were both, well, Gene, it was hard to tell because she seemingly never got excited about anything, but Carl was coming out of his skin. You know, like uncontainable enthusiasm.
This is a celebration of the human spirit, and thank you for bringing your spirits, too. Take a shot of Gene and me in the crowd. But you don't even put it on infinity. You have it on infinity? Okay, look at the camera. Did we stop it? No, the other button. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's like a geyser, you know, just like Old Faithful. The day prior to when we really got the thing on film, he had done the jump basically at night already and done it perfectly. So we knew that everything is going to be perfect. As soon as the sun comes up, he can do this jump. We're going to get it a couple times, so we got it covered, and then we were out of there. Carl's enthusiasm was so high, everybody was really high on this thing. Because you got to remember, base jumping had never been filmed on any kind of big scale. It was little teeny 16mm documentaries that show, you know, people show it on their bathroom wall. And we're a huge network television crew that came in here, swooped in here with a internationally famous star, David Frost, to be, you know, he was the host in the Guinness Book of World Records and all this hoopla, right? And boom, we have 6 cameras, like Banish had another couple of cameras, and we had cameras everywhere. And this was going to be a big event. Everything was going great. Everybody was enthusiastic. It was sort of a big thing. We got up, the sun was perfect. It was a perfect bluebird day. That was lucky enough. We got everybody in position in a matter of a couple hours.
They're getting ready now. The Banish is approaching the jumping off spot, coming out there. And the pilot's doing a fantastic job. It's very difficult right there. He seems to be balancing that helicopter, well, almost on one skid. And there are the Banishes over there. There they are, perched on that very, very tiny outcropping. Now, with the help of our key mountain climber, cameraman as well, John Long there. They're making their final equipment checks.
30 seconds. 30 seconds. Are you ready? 20 seconds. 10 seconds. 10 seconds. Are you ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go!
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Let's find Carl now. He's a little behind you.
He was very enthusiastic.
There he is. All right. Perfect landing.
He was always enthusiastic about all of his projects, particularly after a jump was finished or the film was in the can.
Terrific. Congratulations.
That really excited him.
It was exciting. Wow. Wow. That's a jump of a lifetime.
Love is like oxygen. You get too much, you get too high. Not enough and you're gonna die. Love gets you high. Time on my...
Boy, did you see how much lift this big parachute has? Yeah. I was staying up forever.
Well, listen, just by landing safely, that means you have set now a new world's record for base jumping. Norris, do you have the exact figures?
At least 400 feet further than any other base jump in history. And the speed, because you deployed so late, it was like flashing through a 20-story building in 1 second.
Carl was really enthusiastic about having finished the jumps.
Yeah. To see that wall rushing by, man, we loved it.
And for Carl, too, to have been able to made a record jump.
It was like, let's get out of here before something, you know, before the mountain falls on top of us. You just had this feeling of doom hanging over something that was potentially that sketchy. So the moment they were over, as though retroactively something could happen, and combined with the fact that that was the last piece that we needed to do on the show, both of those combined and in concert gave everybody a reason to get, you know, it put jet, you know, underneath everybody, and they were gone, bam, out of there.
After our record jumps, we were both really tired because we had been up for a number of days with very little sleep, particularly in the last 24 hours or more. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning and it was not dark. We really had a great deal of difficulty in this midnight sun situation. We had a short night that night. I was tired from the jumps the day before. And I told him I was going to sleep in, and he had decided he wanted to go and jump the Brewer Scar, which was the normally jump site. So I didn't think much of it, but I was grousing a bit about, well, you're tired, then why don't you stay? Why do you have to go do this right now? You know, right today when you're tired, stay here and sleep. That morning that Carl left for the jump, as I was lying in bed, I was grumping at him that I didn't think that he should be doing this because he must be tired. And that was the way I was expressing my feelings and my intuitions about it. If I had had 30 years more of experience that I have now, perhaps I would have expressed my feelings in a different way and understood that there was a message there for me, that it was not a good idea for him to do this. That's the honest truth about it, and I can only look at it in hindsight from here.
There was 2 locals, friends of mine, that followed him up. And also Gene was aware that he was going up, of course, but somewhere on the route they decided to go for Stubben instead. His foot made much trouble for him, because I've seen that in the earlier days as well, that he was having problems when we were walking up in the rough terrain. It's quite rough up in the back of the Trolltins. And it was a decision he took there and then to get back down an easy way, I think.
The fact is, we had done the record jump, filmed it, and not more than 12 hours later, he had hiked back up there. That didn't make any sense to me. I didn't know how that was possible. The fact we heard that he'd done Steuben was like, that didn't make any sense, because we had agreed when we did the rock drop test that it was suicidal. Nobody could survive that jump. Why did he done that? Why was it that if he was going to go back up, he didn't ask Fred or I to go up with him?
On Friday night, I was on Grand Hotel at Åndalsnes because Carl had borrowed a room so he could pack his parachute. So I and my brother was with him, and he explained a lot about base jumping and how to pack the chute so it released quick and things like that. It didn't go well that day. I have an impression that Carl, more than most of us, felt God had a plan for him that he had to fulfill. I am a person who remembers in pictures, so I have a small glimpse of what happened during the day. Me and my brother, we picked him up in my brother's car where he lived with Gryner. I remember driving from Gryner and up to Trollstigen. Not so good weather. It was a little rain and quite windy. We went not so fast because he had a problem with his leg. And then we went further up to Stubben. We climbed up to the pinnacle and sat there for at least it was more than half an hour, maybe up to an hour. He started to throw stones to measure the height of the wall. We sat on top of the pinnacle and chatted on different matters of life. On the top of the mountain, he asked us if we knew the story from the Bible, the temptation of Jesus. The devil brought Jesus to Jerusalem and put him on the highest point of the temple. And he said that if you throw yourself down, God will send his angels and carry you in their arms, so you will not hurt your foot on a rock. Jesus answered, "Do not put the Lord on test." And Carl just had a particular laughter, and he pointed to his parachute and he said, "This is my angel." I think it's really amazing kind of last words. I don't know what it means, but it feels like it means something. And finally he said that he wanted to jump. We prepared our cameras. So I saw his jump through the lens. I saw the back of the whole body, more like just his feet diving down. His parachute was stalling against the mountain, and he slided under his parachute down the mountain and stopped in some snow. No signs of life. No movements or anything after the parachute stopped. It was before the days of the mobile phone. It was decided my brother would run down to call the police and start the rescue operation. I waited looking down on him on top of the mountain.
Police District, Romsdalen. On Saturday, 7th of July, 84, approximately 4:35 p.m., I received a call from Arnstein Mischa. Arnstein explained he was calling from Trollstigen Fjellstue and reported that he had just, approximately 3:50 p.m., been a witness to Bonish, Karl, Ronald, jump from Staben, a mountaintop situated between Trollryggen and Samletind in Trolltind-massivet. The jump had for one reason or another failed, such that Bonish hit the mountain wall and was suspended over the valley.
We had both a camera each, and we were taking picture when the accident happened. You get so shocked, you started to think about that you don't want to sell the photos. Why don't we have the photos and just don't sell it? It's not more difficult than that. But we decided to destroy the pictures, just to open up and pull it out of the cassette. So it was fully exposed to the light.
I went back to where I was staying after we wrapped. I think I just laid down. It was probably still mid to late afternoon, and I didn't really get up until the next morning when Fred came hammering on my door and said, "Hey, Carl's been in an accident." Fred came and got me. I got in the car. We drove down, looked up, saw Carl's body. Wasn't moving. His red parachute was sort of billowing in the air. He was probably 3/4 of a mile away and a couple thousand feet up the flank of the bottom of the wall. We went back to the police and said, you know, we're gonna have to try to figure something out and get up to get him. So they're gonna have to call in a Coast Guard helicopter, and they did. They had to fly up into the slab at the bottom of the wall. We couldn't really climb up to it. You know, it was sort of in an isolated area, but they recovered Carl's body, brought it on the helicopter. They flew that helicopter down to the police station and landed. Meanwhile, we hadn't gotten a hold of Jean, which was probably not fair to her. Nobody got a hold of Jean until the helicopter was on its way. And I was there with the police officer, and let me tell you, that was one of the boldest things I've ever seen anybody do, was to call her up. I mean, I'll never forget it. I mean, this guy is talking on the phone. He knew that the situation was bad. And he's talking to her, and he was holding it together with the last ounce of strength that he had, saying, your husband has been involved in an accident, and it doesn't look good. And I'll never forget watching that. God, that was awful, wasn't that? But that was just one of those things that we just had to watch it and deal with it, you know. It's just like, ah, oh, this is happening. Is this really happening? Well, it was, you know.
The police had come, 2 of them, and I met them downstairs at Gruner's Heiting, and they told me that Carl was dead. Everybody in the room looked at me silently, and I could tell instantly that it was up to me and my response to determine the entire atmosphere that would surround everything that would happen subsequent to this announcement. At first I didn't understand, because it didn't make sense, because I still thought he had jumped from Burskar. But then, as the conversation proceeded, that was when it was revealed that he had jumped from Staben, and things started to fall into place in a very different way. So my response may not have been what they expected, because I needed to put on the hat of finding out what happened. Carl and I were not just husband and wife, we were professionals, we were pioneers, we were people working together in something that was a vital activity. And as a vital activity that other people were participating in as well, the necessity was to find out what in the world happened. He had a good exit, but somehow obviously got turned around into the cliff, and that is not a sight where you have achieved the distance from the cliff that you need to be able to handle being turned into the cliff that soon upon opening.
I have a picture in my mind of him lying here with his red helmet on, a blue jacket, and of course also the injuries. He has many bad injuries and serious injuries, both in breast, head, and also the arms and legs. I think he died immediately.
I could see that it looked like Carl as far as the presence of the body, but the real Carl was absolutely, clearly not there.
I have seen a lot of dead people and dying, but this particular moment here is one of the strongest moments because of his visions, his dreams, and what he did in Trollveggen. What Carl did was something that the whole country was interested in, so it was strange, touching. It's about limits, living on the edge, and of course his dreams, as I said, his vision, and then suddenly was here lying dead. And you know, when they are here, they are really dead.
After that, we got on the ferry, and it was just, you know, beautiful. And I cried a little in the car and kept driving back to Åndalsnes to Gruner's Heiting. A couple of days after Carl died was the day that Eric Finns was planning on jumping.
There I was going to jump off the troll wall, and Carl dies, and I'm just like, holy shit, but there was something that was, there was something that was bigger than the moment that was like driving me to want to continue.
Word spread like wildfire that Carl had died. Very quickly, people around the world in the jumping community knew what had happened, and it really, really shocked and shook so many people.
And I said, I want to still do it. She was like, I want to do it too, with you. We're going to go do it.
Not wanting him to seem disrespectful in making a jump, it would remove any aura of seeming disrespect for me to be the one to be making a jump first after Carl's death. To show people it's fine, it's okay. Carl wanted everybody to get on with his lives after he died, and that there was nothing wrong with base jumping because of this. We just had to learn from it and go on.
Den 23 år gamle fallskjermhopperen Jean Bonish, enken efter Karl Bonish, som lørdag omkom under et hopp fra trollveggen, hadde I kveld et vellykket utsprang fra det 1500 meter høye bruraskaret I trollveggen.
As I was under canopy coming down from that jump, I had my last personal time. I had my last quiet time, and I could see as I was coming in for a landing that there was a group that had gathered, and there was the prospect of having to deal with the press.
Well, I'm a base jumper, and I'm a professional, and Carl wanted that no one should miss a beat in their lives if and when he died, whenever that would have been, and it didn't matter how.
Everybody goes through the same things in life from the time they're born to the time they die. We all go through birth and death, but we have had cultural pressures about how to handle it.
What did you feel doing this jump today?
It was just like any other base jump. It was the same.
Were you thinking of some special thing?
No, nothing really special.
So you didn't have your husband in mind?
Well, under canopy, I thought of him, but that's really kind of personal.
Everyone has his own real way of reacting. It will be individual. And base jumping encourages people to think as individuals, to discover and explore their individuality. It is not unique to base jumping. Base jumping is just a condensed version. Somehow, in this earthly experience, we have to depart. There has been no one who has not departed from this earthly experience. So don't let death impede you as a hurdle. Don't let it be a wall that you bang up against and then can't see past, can't see through, can't see over. Climb the wall as quickly as you can and go on.
We know everyone doesn't want to do this, but if they see us do it, they can be inspired to go out and bowl a perfect 300 game or mow the lawn, or it doesn't matter what. They're encouraged by what we can do, and I think it makes you know, a better quality life for us to know that we can do this.
You know, you go to that, you always wonder with Carl that underneath, what's the real story? What are those core beliefs that would drive you to do that? And I got to think it's that sort of mystical thing where he thought that he could, that mind over matter thing, he was the one person that could get away with it, but the troll wall had other ideas.
What deserves the praise? Death doesn't deserve praise. Life and the wondrous works that we do in life from our good ideas, those deserve the praise. That's what we should be standing by. That's what we should be paying attention to. And that's what Carl was all about. Carl would love to have the new wingsuit flyers standing on his shoulders and jumping off. They have taken from what he was trying to inspire in people about breaking through artificial limitations and going beyond what people say can or cannot be done. He would be right there with the wingsuit flyers, and in essence is.
So sleep, silent angel, go to sleep. Sometime, all I need is the air that I breathe and to love you. All I need is the air that I breathe and to love you.
Sunshine came softly through my window today. Could have tripped out easy, but I've changed my way. It'll take time, I know it, but in a while you're gonna be mine, I know it. We're doing it in style, 'cause I've made my mind up, you're going to be mine. I'll tell you right now, ain't a trick in the book, and I'll baby, all that I can find. Superman or Green Lantern ain't got nothing on me. I can make like a turtle and dive for a puff in the sea. You can just sit there thinking on your velvet throne. Yes, I'll write all the rainbows that you can have for your own. 'Cause I made my mind up, you're going to be mine. I'll tell you right now, any trick in the book, and I baby, all that I can find. Everybody's hustling just to have a little scene. When I say we'll be cool, I think that you know what I mean. We stood on the beach at sunset. Do you remember when? I know a beach where, baby, it never ends. When you've made your mind up forever to be mine. I'll pick up your hand and slowly blow your little mind. 'Cause I've made my mind up, you're going to be mine. I'll tell you right now, any trick in the book, and now baby, all that I can find. Superman or Green Lantern ain't got nothing on me. I can make like a turtle and dive for your brother in the sea. Yep, I give you, you can just sit there while thinking on your velvet throne. Write all the rainbows that you can have for your own. When you've made your mind up forever to be mine, I'll pick up your hand and slowly blow your little mind. When you've made your mind up forever to be mine, I'll pick up your hand, I'll pick up your hand and slowly